Evelyn, is that you?
Daniel?
Is that you? I miss you so much. Are you okay?
A trembling hand touched the face of a young man in an old black and white photograph, and for the first time in my life, I watched my grandmother forget how to breathe. The rain was tapping softly against the window. The room was quiet, and beside me was a wooden table covered with things she had hidden from us for decades. Letters, hospital papers, a silver locket, and one photograph of a handsome young man standing outside a little pizza shop in 1974. I was only trying to clean her room. I was not trying to open a wound. But when I asked, "Grandma, who is this man?" she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "That is the boy they took me from." What she said next changed everything we thought we knew about our family. For 50 years, my grandmother, Evelyn Whitemore, lived like a woman who had made peace with her past. She smiled at birthdays. She cooked during Thanksgiving. She prayed over every grandchild before we left her house. She kept family photos on the wall, wore pearl earrings every Sunday, and told us stories about almost everything except the one thing that truly shaped her life. Nobody in our family knew that before she became the quiet old woman we loved, she had once been the only daughter of one of the wealthiest families in New England. Nobody knew that she had once fallen in love with a boy named Daniel Hayes. And nobody knew that the love they were forced to bury had left behind not one child, but two. This is the story my grandmother spent half a century trying to forget. It is the story of a rich girl and a pizza boy, a forbidden love, a pregnancy her family tried to erase, a hospital room where one woman made a decision that should never have been hers to make, and a reunion that brought two old lovers face to face after 50 years of silence. But this is not only a love story, it is a warning about what happens when pride becomes more important than truth, when parents confuse control with protection, and when family secrets are passed down like inheritance. Because some secrets do not stay buried forever. Some secrets wait patiently until one photograph falls into the hands of someone brave enough to ask questions. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. And as you listen to this story, I want you to ask yourself one question. If the person you loved most was taken away from you by people with money, power, and influence, how long would your heart wait before it stopped hoping? 1 year? 10 years? 50 years? Because Daniel Hayes waited longer than anyone expected. And Evelyn Whitemore, though she married later, raised a family, and grew old behind the name her parents protected, never truly stopped hearing the voice of the boy who once told her she deserved to choose her own road. Evelyn was born into comfort, but comfort was not the same as freedom. Her father, Charles Whitemore, owned hotels, warehouses, shipping interests, and enough real estate to make people lower their voices when his name was mentioned. Her mother, Margaret Whitemore, came from old money and believed reputation was something a family protected, even if it meant sacrificing happiness. Evelyn grew up in a mansion where every room was beautiful and every door felt guarded. She had private tutors, piano lessons, imported dresses, and drivers who opened doors before her hand reached the handle. From the outside, it looked like a perfect life. But inside that house, Evelyn was not treated like a daughter with dreams. She was treated like the future signature on a business agreement. Her parents had plans for her long before she understood what those plans meant. She was expected to marry well, speak carefully, dress properly, and never embarrass the Whitemore name. At dinner parties, grown men discussed her future like she was not sitting there. Wealthy families brought their sons around her as if choosing a wife was no different from choosing a business partner. Evelyn learned how to smile when she was uncomfortable. She learned how to say thank you when she wanted to say no. But deep down, she carried a loneliness that money could not reach. She once told me that the loneliest place in the world was not an empty room. It was a full room where everyone saw your value, but nobody saw your heart. Then came the school excursion that changed her life. It was the summer of 1974, and Evelyn's private academy took a group of senior students on a cultural trip through small historic towns in Massachusetts. It was supposed to be educational, quiet, and supervised. The kind of trip her parents approved because nothing dangerous was expected to happen. But love does not always enter through the front door. Sometimes it appears beside a bus stop, wearing a flour-dusted apron, carrying 2 pizza boxes, and smiling like the world is kinder than it really is. His name was Daniel Hayes. He worked afternoons at his uncle's pizza shop and spent his mornings helping his mother, Ruth, who was a midwife at a nearby hospital. Evelyn met Daniel because of a scarf. That was how she told it. The wind pulled it from her neck while her classmates were leaving the bus, and before she could run after it, Daniel caught it near the curb. He handed it back with a small smile and said, "You look like you were about to chase that thing all the way to Boston." Evelyn laughed before she could stop herself. That mattered because in her world, laughter was usually measured. But Daniel was easy. He was not impressed by her last name because he did not know it yet. He did not ask who her father was. He did not ask where she lived. He simply asked if she was enjoying the trip, and somehow that question felt more personal than anything rich boys had ever asked her. For the rest of that afternoon, Evelyn kept looking toward the pizza shop. Daniel noticed, but he did not make a show of it. When her group stopped for lunch, he brought extra napkins to her table and said, "In case the rich-looking kids do not know pizza can fight back." Evelyn almost choked from laughing. He was teasing, but not cruelly. He treated her like a person, not an heiress, not a prize, not a family project. Before she left, he slipped a paper napkin under her plate. On it was a phone number and 1 sentence. On it was a phone number and 1 sentence. If you ever get tired of being watched, call someone who knows how to listen. She kept that napkin for 50 years. I know because I found it folded inside the same box as the photograph. That should have been the end. A small meeting, a sweet memory, a young girl returning to her polished life. But some moments do not end when the day ends. They follow you home. Evelyn said she thought about Daniel during dinner that night while her father discussed a merger and her mother corrected her posture. She thought about him while her maid brushed her hair. She thought about him when she looked through her bedroom window at the long driveway leading to the locked gate. 3 nights later, she called him from the hallway phone while everyone slept. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost hung up before he answered. When Daniel said hello, Evelyn forgot every careful sentence she had prepared. They began with short calls, then came letters, then came secret meetings whenever Evelyn could convince her driver to stop at bookstores, charity events, or school activities. Daniel was not foolish. He understood quickly that Evelyn's life was not ordinary, but he also understood something her own family ignored. She was tired of being handled. Around Daniel, she could talk about books, music, dreams, fear, and the strange sadness of having everything except the freedom to choose anything. Around Evelyn, Daniel could admit he wanted more than the pizza shop, not because he was ashamed of honest work, but because he wanted to build something with his own name on it. They were young, but what grew between them was not childish. It was secret, serious, and dangerous. The danger was not because Daniel was a bad boy. He did not drink heavily, he did not gamble, he did not chase trouble. In many ways, he was exactly the kind of young man most parents should have prayed their daughter would meet. He was respectful, hard-working, loyal, and gentle without being weak. The danger was that Daniel had no family name the Whitmores could use. He had no fortune to merge with theirs. He had no father on a country club board, no trust fund, no political connections, and no polished history that could sit comfortably beside their own. To Charles Whitmore, that made Daniel invisible, and in wealthy families like the Whitmores, invisible people were allowed to serve, deliver, clean, and smile. They were not allowed to marry the daughter. For months, Evelyn and Daniel hid what they had. They met near a lake outside town, behind a church after evening service, once in the back row of a small movie theatre, where Evelyn cried through a comedy because Daniel held her hand in public for the first time. Every meeting came with fear, but every goodbye made the next meeting feel necessary. Daniel told her he loved her first. He did not say it with grand drama. He said it one evening while walking her back toward the road where her driver was waiting. "I know I should be careful," he told her, "but I love you, Evelyn." She stopped walking. For a moment, she looked frightened. Then she said, "I love you too, that is what scares me." The first crack came from the household driver. Evelyn had trusted him because he had been around since she was a girl. But loyalty in that house did not belong to Evelyn. It belonged to the paycheck. One afternoon, after she begged him to leave her near a bookstore, he circled the block and followed her. He saw Daniel. He saw the way Evelyn smiled before she even reached him. He saw them sit close together at the lake. By nightfall, Charles Whitmore had photographs on his desk, not rumors, not suspicion. Evelyn was called into his study after dinner. Her mother was already seated, pale and silent. Her father did not shout at first. That was what frightened her most. He only tapped the photographs with one finger and asked, "How long has my daughter been humiliating this family?" Evelyn tried to explain, but families like hers did not hold conversations when control was at stake. Her father called Daniel a delivery boy, as if honest work were a disease. Her mother asked whether Evelyn understood what people would say if anyone found out. Evelyn said she loved him. Her father laughed, but there was no humor in it. He told her love was a word young people used when they wanted permission to ruin themselves. Evelyn stood there, shaking, and said Daniel was kinder than anyone they had ever introduced her to. That was when Charles Whitmore's face changed. He told her kindness did not build empires. He told her she would never see Daniel again. And when she said he could not stop her, he replied, "You have no idea what I can stop." From that night, Evelyn's life became smaller. Her calls were watched. Her letters were intercepted. Her school activities were cancelled. The gates that once made the mansion look important now made it feel like a private prison. Daniel came to the house twice. The first time, security told him Evelyn was unavailable. The second time, he refused to leave until he saw her. That was when Charles had him dragged away from the gate in front of neighbors and staff. Daniel shouted Evelyn's name until his voice broke, but she never heard him. She was upstairs behind a locked bedroom door, crying into a pillow while her mother stood outside, telling her that one day she would thank them for saving her from a poor man's life. Then Evelyn discovered she was pregnant. She was 17, terrified, and still locked inside a family that treated scandal like death. At first, she told nobody. She counted days, denied symptoms, and prayed she was wrong. But the body tells the truth, even when the mouth is afraid. When her mother found her sick one morning, everything moved quickly. Doctors came quietly, doors closed, the staff was sent away. Charles Whitmore did not ask who the father was, he already knew. Evelyn remembered him standing near the window, refusing to look at her, as if her pregnancy had made her less his daughter and more his failure. The first plan was simple, too simple. They wanted the pregnancy gone before the world could know. Evelyn begged in a way she had never begged before. She did not beg for Daniel. She did not beg for herself. She begged for the child. She told them the baby was not shame. She told them the baby was proof that something real had existed in a house full of arrangements. Her mother wept, but her tears did not make her brave. Her father raged, threatened, pleaded, and finally negotiated like he was closing a business deal. Evelyn could give birth, but only under his conditions. She would leave the country. Daniel would never be told. The child would carry no Hayes name. The story would be buried. Evelyn agreed because she thought agreement was the only way to keep her baby alive. Daniel never knew. That was the cruelty that followed him for 50 years. He wrote letters that never reached her. He called numbers that were disconnected. He waited outside places where they used to meet until waiting began to make him look foolish. Then someone from the Whitmore household told him Evelyn had gone abroad willingly, that she had chosen her family, and that a man in his position should accept reality. Daniel did not believe it at first. Love makes people stubborn. But silence has a way of wearing down even the faithful. After weeks became months, and months. Came a year. Daniel stopped asking questions out loud, but he never stopped asking them inside. Why did she leave? Why did she not say goodbye? Did she ever love him at all? Across the ocean, Evelyn was told her own version of pain. She was told Daniel had moved on. She was told he had accepted money to stay away. She was told that a boy like him could never have carried the weight of her family's disgrace. None of it was true, but Evelyn was young, isolated, pregnant, and surrounded by people who controlled every letter, every phone call, every visitor, and every piece of information that reached her. By the time she entered the private hospital where she would give birth, she was no longer fighting for love. She was fighting to survive the consequences of losing it. She believed one thing with her whole heart. Even if Daniel was gone, she would still have his child. That belief was the only thing keeping her steady. But fate had placed one more person inside that hospital. Daniel's mother, Ruth Hayes, had taken temporary midwife work there through a medical placement program. She was not supposed to be assigned to Evelyn's delivery floor that night, but another nurse fell ill, and Ruth was called in to assist. At first, she did not recognize Evelyn. Pain changes faces, fear changes posture. But when Ruth heard the name Whitmore and then saw the young woman crying for Daniel under her breath, she understood. This was the girl. This was the girl her son had loved. This was the girl Ruth had blamed for breaking him. And when the babies came, because there were 2 babies, Ruth's anger met something even more dangerous, a grandmother's grief. Evelyn did not know she had delivered twins. She was weak, medicated, and surrounded by people who had already decided how much truth she deserved. One baby cried strongly, then another. Ruth heard both. She saw both. 2 small lives, 2 tiny bodies, both connected to the son she had watched suffer in silence. In another room that night, a newborn from a different delivery had died. What happened next was not mercy. It was not justice. It was a decision made by a wounded woman who convinced herself she was correcting a wrong. Ruth took one of Evelyn's twins and arranged the records so that loss, confusion, and secrecy covered the truth. Evelyn left that hospital believing she had only one child to hold. Daniel would later raise the other, never knowing the full story. For 50 years, the truth lived in separate houses. One child grew up with Evelyn, surrounded by comfort, but shadowed by a sadness no one could explain. The other grew up with Daniel in a smaller home where money was often tight, but love was steady. Neither child knew there was another face in the world carrying the same beginning. Neither knew that their birthdays were not just birthdays but anniversaries of a crime nobody had named. And Evelyn, my grandmother, carried her one child through life believing that whatever had been taken from her in love, at least motherhood, had remained. She never imagined that half of that motherhood had been stolen before she was even strong enough to sit up in the hospital bed. That was why the photograph shook her so badly. It was not only Daniel's face, it was the door his face opened. When I found that picture on the wooden table and asked who he was, my grandmother did not answer like a woman remembering an old boyfriend. She answered like a witness returning to the scene of a life she had been forced to abandon. Her fingers pressed against the photograph as if she could feel the warmth of Daniel's cheek through the paper. Then she whispered, "He was the first person who ever asked me what I wanted." I asked what happened to him. She looked toward the window where the rain kept falling and said, "My family happened to him." And that was the sentence that made me start searching. At first, I only wanted to know whether Daniel Hayes was still alive. I thought maybe I could give my grandmother peace before time took the chance away from her. I searched old town directories, business records, archived newspaper mentions, and anything connected to a Hayes family pizza shop from the 1970s. It took weeks. Then one evening I found a small article about a community fundraiser in a town in Vermont. There he was, older, grey-haired, standing beside a brick pizza oven, smiling with the same eyes from the photograph. Daniel Hayes was alive. He had never become rich. He had never become famous. But the article called him a beloved local business owner, a widower, a father, and a man who remembered every customer's name. I should have stopped there and told my grandmother gently. But something in that article held me in place. Daniel had a son. The son's name was Michael Hayes. And when I found a public photo of Michael standing beside Daniel at the restaurant, I felt the room tilt. Michael looked like my father, not a little. Not in the vague way strangers sometimes resemble each other. He looked like family, the same eyes, the same mouth, the same small crease above the left eyebrow. I stared at the screen until my own reflection appeared over his face. Then I opened the old box again, pulled out Evelyn's hospital papers, and saw dates that made my hands go cold. The impossible was beginning to look less impossible. When I called Daniel Hayes for the first time, my voice shook so badly I almost ended the call before he answered. I told him my name was Madison, and that I was Evelyn Whitmore's granddaughter. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then I heard an old man breathe in sharply, as if the name had crossed 50 years and struck him in the chest. He did not ask if Evelyn was alive. He asked, "Did she send you?" I said no. I told him I had found a photograph. I told him my grandmother had never forgotten him. His voice changed then. It became smaller, almost younger. "That cannot be true," he said. She left. And I knew in that moment that both of them had been living under different lies. Daniel did not agree to meet at first. Pain had made him careful. But he listened. And the more we spoke, the more the dates, the pregnancy, the hospital, and Michael's face formed a pattern none of us could ignore. I asked if he would consider a DNA test. He resisted because some truths arrive like storms, and old people know storms can still destroy what is left standing. But Michael agreed. My father agreed. The waiting felt longer than the search. When the results arrived, nobody spoke for several minutes. My father and Michael were not distant relatives. They were full siblings, the kind of match that turns family history into evidence. And based on their ages, birth dates, and medical records, there was only one conclusion left. My grandmother had given birth to twins. One had been raised by her. One had been raised by Daniel, and neither of them had been told the truth. Daniel found Ruth's confession 3 days later. His mother had died years before, but she had left a sealed letter inside her old Bible with his name written across it. He said he had seen it before, but never opened it because the outside said, "Only when the past returns." Now the past had returned with names, dates, and blood proof. Ruth admitted everything. She wrote that she had seen Evelyn in the hospital and realized the babies belonged to Daniel. She wrote that she had hated the Whitmores for what they did to her son. She wrote that when she saw 2 babies, she told herself Daniel deserved 1 piece of what had been stolen from him. Then she wrote the sentence that broke him. "A child is not justice when the truth has to be murdered to keep him." The reunion was arranged quietly. No cameras from news stations, no reporters, no crowd, just family, truth, and 2 old people carrying 50 years of questions. My grandmother wore a blue dress because she said Daniel had once told her blue made her look like summer after rain. Daniel waited at the small station with flowers in his hand, though his fingers trembled so badly one of the stems bent. When Evelyn stepped out, neither of them moved at first. They just looked. Time had changed their faces, but it had not erased recognition. Daniel finally smiled through tears and said, "You're late." Evelyn covered her mouth and answered, "I know." Then he said, 50 years late?" And she replied, "Then please do not make me lose another minute." Their embrace was not the embrace of young lovers. It was slower, heavier, and deeper than that. It carried every letter that never arrived, every birthday spent wondering, every lie that had shaped their lives, every child raised without the full truth, and every silent night when both of them believed the other had chosen to leave. But the moment that truly brought everyone to tears came when Michael stood in front of my father. 2 grown men, both grey at the temples, both old enough to have grandchildren of their own, staring at the twin they never knew existed. My father touched his own face, then looked at Michael and said, "I have missed someone I did not know was alive." Michael laughed and cried at the same time. In the months that followed, there were no easy answers. Forgiveness did not arrive like a clean ending. Evelyn had to face the truth that her parents had stolen her choice. Daniel had to face the truth that his mother, whom he loved deeply, had also stolen a child's beginning. My father and Michael had to grieve a childhood they never shared. There were questions nobody could fully answer because the people who made the cruelest decisions were already gone. But somehow, out of all that damage, the family chose not to waste what remained. Evelyn and Daniel did not try to recreate their youth. They knew those years were gone. Instead, they chose the small, ordinary life they had once dreamed about before wealth and pride tore them apart. They moved into Daniel's town, not as a scandal, not as a headline, but as 2 old people who had finally found their way back to the truth. They sat on the porch in the evenings. They drank coffee in the mornings. Sometimes they held hands without speaking. Sometimes Evelyn would look at Daniel and apologize again, and he would tell her, "You were taken too." Sometimes Daniel would speak of Ruth with love and anger in the same breath because human beings are rarely only one thing. And every Sunday the twins brought their families together at Daniel's old pizza shop, where the photograph now sits framed on the wall. Not to glorify the pain, but to remind everyone what silence can cost. So what does this story teach us? Maybe it teaches us that love can survive time, but people should never be forced to prove love by surviving cruelty. Maybe it teaches us that parents can damage children while believing they are protecting them. Maybe it teaches us that class can become a wall so high that even truth struggles to climb it. And maybe it teaches us that secrets do not protect families. They only postpone the day the family must finally pay for them. My grandmother lost 50 years with Daniel. My father lost 50 years with his twin. Daniel lost the chance to raise both his children in truth. And all of it began because powerful people were more afraid of embarrassment than heartbreak. If you were Evelyn, would you have forgiven your parents? If you were Daniel, would you have forgiven Ruth? And if you were one of the twins, would you be grateful to know the truth after 50 years? Or would you wish the past had stayed buried? Let us know your honest thoughts in the comments, because this is the kind of story that does not end when the video ends. It follows you into your own memories. It makes you wonder who in your family loved quietly, who suffered silently, and who carried a truth they were never allowed to speak. And if this story touched you, subscribe for more emotional, true storytelling, because sometimes the most powerful stories are not found in fiction. Sometimes they are hidden in a box, waiting for one brave question.